In the early 18th century, Prague was a city suspended between empires. While the great powers of Europe waged wars across the continent, this Bohemian capital remained a place where old kingdoms still whispered through cobblestone and spire. The city had weathered conquest, plague, and fire, yet somehow preserved a grandeur that belonged to an earlier, more mystical age. Walking its streets meant moving through layers of memory. Gothic towers rising beside Baroque palaces, Latin inscriptions beside Czech prayers. Artificial intelligence has helped us reconstruct what these streets truly looked like, combining period engravings, architectural records, and written accounts from travelers who passed through. What emerges is not just a city, but a living archive of a world we thought we knew. But beneath the golden domes and ornate facades, something was shifting, quietly reshaping the social fabric of this ancient place. The most natural entry into Prague was from the south, crossing the Vltava River on the ancient stone bridge that bore the name of a long-dead emperor. Charles Bridge in the 1700s was not the tourist thoroughfare it would become, but a vital commercial artery crowded with carts hauling grain, wool, and timber into the old town. Merchants set up stalls directly on the bridge itself, selling bread, dried fish, and small devotional items beneath the watchful eyes of Baroque saints mounted on pedestals above. The statues were relatively new then, still white and sharp-edged, not yet darkened by centuries of weathering. Fishermen worked the river below, their boats drifting between mill wheels that churned steadily in the current. The air smelled of damp stone and wood smoke. Today, this bridge is lined with artists and musicians, but in 1720 it was where the city conducted its daily survival. The sound was not of cameras clicking, but of iron wheels grinding over rock, voices bargaining in German, Czech, and Yiddish, and the deep toll of church bells marking time across the skyline. Beyond the bridge, the old town square opened like a stage set for all of Prague's contradictions. Here, elegant townhouses painted in ochre and pale rose stood shoulder to shoulder with narrow medieval structures that leaned precariously toward the cobblestones. The astronomical clock on the town hall still drew crowds at the top of each hour, its mechanical apostles appearing in the windows just as they do now. But the square itself was a working space. Farmers sold vegetables from wooden carts, butchers hung meat on hooks under canvas awnings, and beggars pressed themselves against church walls, holding out wooden bowls. Children ran between the stalls, barefoot even in autumn. Women in heavy skirts and linen caps moved with baskets, inspecting turnips and haggling over the price of salt. The wealthy crossed the square in carriages, their faces hidden behind curtains, while clerks and tradesmen walked briskly, ledgers tucked under arms. Somewhere in this daily choreography, the old feudal order was beginning to crack, though no one could yet name what would replace it. Prague's economy in the 1700s depended on skilled hands more than machines. Workshops lined the narrow streets radiating from the square. Glassblowers, bookbinders, tailors, watchmakers, each trade occupying its own small universe of apprenticeship and guild regulation. The city was famous for its glass, particularly the deep ruby red variety that required a secret formula guarded jealously by a handful of families. These craftsmen worked in cramped spaces lit by tallow candles, heating sand and minerals in furnaces that made the rooms unbearably hot even in winter. Meanwhile, the Jewish quarter across the river operated under its own restrictions, but contributed significantly to money lending, textile trade, and printing. The city's wealth did not flow from a single source, but from 1,000 small transactions, debts, and inheritments carefully recorded in ledgers that still survive in archives. This intricate economy would later be swept aside by industrialization, but for now, it functioned with the precision of that famous astronomical clock, each part knowing its place, each movement timed to the rhythm of seasons and saints' days. Ascending the hill toward the castle, the city transformed. The streets widened, the buildings grew taller and more ornate, the air somehow seemed cleaner. This was where the aristocracy lived, Bohemian nobles with titles dating back to medieval crusades, alongside newer families enriched by the Habsburg court. Their palaces were statement pieces, Baroque facades covered in stucco reliefs of gods and heroes, windows so tall a man could walk through them. Inside, French furniture competed with Flemish paintings, while servants moved through marble hallways carrying trays of wine imported from the Rhine. These families spoke German among themselves, reserving Czech for orders given to the lower classes. They attended Mass in private chapels, commissioned portraits from Italian painters, and married their children to cousins in Vienna or Dresden. The contrast with the old town below was not merely economic, but existential. Two cities occupying the same space, one turned toward the imperial future, the other rooted in local soil. This division would define Prague's politics for the next 2 centuries. At the summit, Prague Castle dominated the city like a small kingdom unto itself. The Gothic cathedral of St. Vitus still stood unfinished, its choir magnificent but its nave incomplete, a symbol of ambitions larger than resources. The castle complex housed the Habsburg governor, a garrison of soldiers, clerks managing imperial taxation, and priests maintaining the careful balance between Czech Catholic tradition and Viennese authority. The treasury held relics that pilgrims had traveled months to see: bones of saints, fragments of the true cross, crowns studded with gemstones. This was not merely a fortress or palace, but a machine for projecting power across Bohemia and beyond. When decisions were made in these halls, villages 100 miles away felt the consequences. The castle's influence extended into every market, every guild hall, every monastery. It represented an order that seemed permanent, ordained by God and emperor alike. But permanence is always an illusion, and even in the 1700s, new ideas were circulating in the coffeehouses below. Ideas about reason, liberty, and the rights of nations. Yet for every grand palace, there were streets where life offered no such security. In the poorest quarters near the city walls, families crowded into rooms that had not seen repair in generations. Disease moved through these neighborhoods like a regular visitor. Typhus, dysentery, smallpox taking children before they reached 5. There were no sanitation systems, only open gutters where waste gathered until rain washed it toward the river. Begging was common enough that the city employed officials to clear vagrants from church steps before important ceremonies. Some turned to crime, others to charity houses run by religious orders where thin soup and hard bread kept bodies alive, if not healthy. This was not unique to Prague. Every European city carried this same shadow population. But it reminds us that the Golden Age was not golden for everyone. The contrast between the castle on the hill and the hovels at its base was a moral equation the era could not solve, though it would try in the revolutions to come. By the century's end, a new structure would rise in the old town that symbolized everything changing beneath the surface: the Estates Theater, where Mozart himself would premiere Don Giovanni in 1787. It was built not by the church or the nobility, but by a count who believed in the transformative power of art. And it opened its doors not just to aristocrats, but to anyone who could afford a ticket. The theater represented something radical for its time, a public space where merchant and nobleman might sit in the same building, moved by the same music, if not yet quite as equals. This was the future pressing against the past, the Enlightenment arriving in Prague through melodies and arias. The city that had been defined by hierarchy and tradition was beginning, just beginning, to imagine itself differently. Prague in the 1700s was not one city but many, layered atop one another like the centuries of paint on an old canvas. Walking its streets meant moving between worlds, sacred and commercial, German and Czech, aristocratic and desperate. The spires still rise today, and the bridge still spans the Vltava, but the city they served has vanished into the space between historical records and human memory. Perhaps that's what makes these reconstructions valuable. They let us stand for a moment in a world that no longer exists, except in the architecture that survived and the archives that remembered. If you'd like to visit another city in another century, leave your request below. Until then, we'll keep traveling backward, one reconstruction at a time.